If you give yourself permission to endure a little bit of something unpleasant or to suffer a little bit and like problem solve and get through tough times, that's the coolest thing, is to discovering what you're made of and discovering how strong that you are. And it helps you in so many other aspects of your life.
This is Running for Real, the podcast for runners who know that for every runner's high, there are just as many lows. All those just missed PRs, easy runs that feel hard, injury blues, and more. Each week, we'll talk to running, health, and wellness experts about their highs, lows, and best advice to build our confidence. Running for Real is about being honest, being brave, and most of all, not feeling alone. And now here's our host, Tina Muir.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 175 of the Running For Real podcast. Thank you so much for being here today. I am really thankful that you are here. I hope you are doing well today, and I'm excited for you to meet my guest today. She is very inspiring, and I think everyone is going to be able to take something from this episode with kind of her approach to life and just what she learned from what happened. All right, so last week we had Cindy Kuzma and Carrie Jackson Cheadle on the show, and we were actually talking about injury. Now, that episode was kind of mostly related to their book Rebound, which is about kind of returning from injury, more the mental side of things than anything, because we hear a lot about the physical sides, what things you need to do, how you need to make sure that you are allowing your body to heal and fix those weaknesses. But as I have spoken about many times, the mental side of it is actually the hardest part to kind of wrap your brain around. You lose a lot of your identity. And we do talk about that a lot in the episode today. However, I wanted to do a specific episode on that because it can be debilitating. So if anyone you know is injured, or if you are injured and you are kind of struggling, make sure you go back to that episode number 174 from last week, because you really will speak to that one. And if you are not injured and you didn't need to listen to that one, well, maybe kind of keep it in the back of your mind, because unfortunately for us as runners, most of us at some point are going to end up on the injured train, and it is not fun to be there, especially when it comes at the time that seems to be the least convenient possible. All right, so today I wanted to bring Hilary Allen on the show, who you may know as Hilly Goat Climbs. And I want to thank Florian, one of our superstars, for suggesting her, because I actually hadn't heard about her story at all, even though I'm sure it was, very viral, very out there when it kind of happened. But I think it was just kind of timing wise for me with having my first daughter that I didn't really know anything about her or her story. And I heard about it. I thought she's absolutely perfect for the show. I started to look her up, and she just seemed like she is the ultimate running for real with her personality, the approach she has to life, her vulnerability. So I think you're really going to enjoy this episode with her, because she's just such a wonderful person. And you'll hear she has accomplished a lot in not a lot of time, but then had something happen to her which really kind of tipped the world upside down, literally, and in every sense of the word. So you are going to learn about what happened with her today. Before we get to that, I just want to take a moment to thank our sponsors, and we'll be right to the episode with Hilary Allen. I don't know if you noticed, but a few months ago, I kind of hated social media. I couldn't stand it. Not because of everyone else, and usually that is the cause, but it was actually myself. I felt so much pressure to put up a photo. And a good photo. It couldn't be a great or a fantastic photo, because if it was by a photographer, I was losing that authenticity. But it couldn't just be a photo of my feet, which was what I was actually looking at most of the time in reality while I was sitting on the couch. But I felt so much pressure, and I felt like I had so much to say, but it just felt fake, like going to take a picture just for the sake of it. I don't know about you, but I really miss those kind of long communications where it's not about like 3 tips to help you do this or tag a friend to do that, but not something that get you to click, but just good old-fashioned emails, like the ones I would send my friends while I was on my lunch break at work before the days of iPhones. I love that like personal nature, while at the same time, letting it flow out onto the keyboard, letting your real self, kind of the way that you talk, flow out onto the keyboard. And I love writing emails in the same way that I would speak them, the way that you're hearing me right now. And that is my goal with these emails. It's not to sell you stuff. It's not to bombard you with emails, but I want to connect with you. I want to get to know you and talk to you the way that I would talk to any of my friends. And I love the replies that I receive every week. it makes me feel like I'm getting to know you a little bit better. I know you get to know me really well through this show, but I love that I can also kind of hear you too. So I am talking about, as I haven't actually mentioned it yet, my Running for Real or my email newsletter. It comes out once a week, every Monday. It's just a thought for the week, some kind of long chat about what I've been thinking about, something that is kind of going on, just kind of within me or within friends and things like that, something I'm thinking about. Often I have a bit of a talent for making it resonate with people. It's all about treating yourself better, becoming the best person you can be, and just kind of, if you like me in this podcast, you'll probably enjoy it. There's also some updates for the week and some recommendations, more just kind of things that I've been listening to or reading that I've been really enjoying. No pressure to click on any of those or anything. I'm not selling anything. Well, very rarely. I'm not spamming you. I'm just talking to you. So if you enjoy that, you can go to tinamuir.com/subscriber. You can also find it in the show notes if you want to check it there. So again, that's tinamuir.com/subscriber. Sign up, and I can't wait to get to know you more. Hilary, welcome to the Running for Real podcast. I am really excited to talk to you. I want to thank my friend Florian for being the one to alert me to your story and just what you've overcome, where you've come from. It's just all amazing. So thank you for being here, for giving us your time today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm super thrilled to be on the podcast.
Yeah, this is exciting. And first I have to ask, because anyone who does follow you or anyone who will go to follow you after this episode will notice that you don't tend to go on social media, at least, by your name. You go by Hilly Goat. Please tell us why that is, because people may be like, what does that mean?
Yeah, so it's Hilly Goat on there. Hilly Goat Climbs is kind of this nickname. So when I first actually started social media, is like when I first started running, but not that long ago, like maybe 5 years. And I had a boyfriend at the time, and we were running like on these trails, and I just had this like knack for running uphill. Like I just loved it. I'd love to get in the groove of it. And when we were going on trails, you constantly see mountain goats in Colorado. And so he had dubbed me this nickname. He's like, oh man, like you just keep on going uphill. You're like a goat. I'm going to start calling you Hilly Goat. And it just kind of stuck. And I figured like it's almost like an alt persona.
Yeah, I think that works well. Yeah, and it does match up with kind of what you've said, and obviously your name kind of fits in there as well. When you were younger, you started out as a tennis player, didn't start running till grad school, but did any part of running talent show early on in childhood? Like I say to people with my running ability myself, I swear my parents are like clutching at straws trying to find some kind of connection, but I personally don't think there was one. But did your parents see anything like when you were a kid? Did you like running up hills, or were you kind of climbing stuff, or was there anything in your childhood that kind of maybe indicated the future of it?
Yeah. So I've thought about this too. So actually my sister, I have an older sister, and she was like the superstar. Like I played tennis because I was like, I didn't want to run because she was like the fast one. So she was a super good high school runner, like ran in college. My father, actually, he ran for the British national team. He's he's very fast. Like 55 years ago, he ran like 2:28, 2:26. Okay,
yeah, wow.
He's very fast. Like, I mean, for like, like the equivalent of 55 years ago running a marathon.
Yeah.
So that was there. But actually, I think what it was is like, I always just loved to be outside and hiking. And I remember a family trip, we went to the Grand Canyon and we hiked down, and then I was like, 9 maybe. And then we hiked back up, and I actually like left my parents. Like, they're like, all right, Hillary, like, we'll see you at the top. Cause I was just like hiking up like super fast. And like, I think my, like the uphill time actually took less than the downhill time. And as a kid, I've always grown up camping, and like, I think I learned to walk outside, like, like crawling around in the dirt. And then like on a hiking trail, I learned how to walk. And I think the first like 13,000 foot peak that I climbed, I was 7.
Wow.
So yeah, I think it started like that, and I didn't realize it until later that I actually had a knack for it.
Yeah. And I'm sure in some way that those circumstances, those, family trips and everything did somewhat, build some kind of foundation to where, I don't know, your body developed in a way that it kind of had learned to handle those kind of things. I don't know. I mean, who knows really, but that is interesting for sure. But going all that time after that till grad school, which you kind of used it as just, something to take the stress off. But tell us about the moment. Is there a moment where you kind of thought to yourself, wow, I totally get running? Like you must have heard maybe your sister or other people you'd known talking about this magic of running. And, you said you didn't like running, or maybe were overshadowed by your sister and thought, no. But tell us about the moment you thought, oh, I totally get it.
Yeah. So I think I'd actually started running as conditioning in tennis. And so it's a lot of sprint work in tennis, but I noticed that the longer the matches went, the better success I had. Mm-hmm. So I had this crazy record in college that every time I went to a third set, because in women you play best 2 out of 3 sets, I had never lost a match. And so I could literally just like outlast the other person. And I had started doing some like just running just to stay in shape for tennis, like kind of in the off season. But yeah, like I said, it wasn't until graduate school that I really started taking it seriously. And I not even seriously, I had just like started running as a stress relief. And I found this group of women. They were Olympic trial marathoners in the 80s. And they're like about early 50s when I found them. And they were like the only group that I found that would run at 5:30 in the morning before I had to be to lab at 8 a.m. And so it was perfect. So I started running with them. And one of the women, her name was Janie Day, and she had the record on the Pikes Peak Ascent, which is just a pretty competitive, just 13 miles. It's outside of Manitou Springs in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And you just run to the top of a 14,000 foot peak, Pikes Peak. And she had the record on this. It's all single track trail. And so she kind of introduced me to trail running. She's like, she kind of saw my knack for endurance as I had started running. So you started on the roads? On the roads. And in fact, Janie, she wanted, I like was curious because everyone had always done a marathon. I was like, I've never done a marathon. Like maybe I'll train for one. And so she was kind of my first coach and like trained me for a marathon, but she took me out to the trails every Sunday for my recovery run because like it didn't matter the pace. You could like hike if you wanted, it was just like out there to be moving. And after I ran my first marathon, it was like, all right, that hurts. It went okay. And then I had this I never considered myself like a very speedy runner. I wanted to see if I could break 3 hours. And Janie crewed me for this, in Washington Park. I was running this 2.25 mile loop around a park to see if I could break 3 hours. And I ran a 2:51:50. And then
so after that was your marathon, or you did it in a race as well?
I did it in a race. So my first one was at California International Marathon. Okay. I ran a 3:19 and it was literally pouring rain. I think I put Vaseline on my feet because I was running through puddles of water. It was a year where a lot of people pulled out because it was, forget what year that was. But yeah. And then I had done another thing on the road just because it was super close to campus and I needed to stay, I thought running in the city was, more convenient at that time. But then after I did that on the roads, I was like, you know what? I just have this, I'm just drawn to the trails because every time I would look forward to that Sunday run every week. And then I just started running more and more on the trails. And I just remember all this, I don't even know if it was, I think it was after running the marathon, I just clicked. It was okay, this is all I want to do. It doesn't matter. I could leave my watch at the door. It didn't really matter pace. I could just go on effort. I felt like I was a kid again because I had grown up in the trails of, the Rocky Mountains in Colorado hiking, but I didn't know you could run these trails. And so I started experimenting with steeper trails, more runnable trails. And it just became this huge playground. Yeah. Then I was okay, I think I can do this every day. And then I just started driving back and forth to the trailhead. So
cool. And then from there, you started to improve very quickly, started to win races on the trails, pretty early on. Now doing very, very well, very quickly. Was any of that, looking back, kind of hard to deal with because, either then or now, because it kind of sets you up with these expectations? I see a lot of runners kind of find the sport. They find out they're very good and they just have this kind of upward spike of how quickly they're improving. But sometimes that's actually quite difficult to deal with. Did you find that at all?
I did, because I'm a very hard worker. So, I think obviously there is a little bit of talent associated with running. But also I think it's just because if you like something and you work hard at it, you can see results. So I always thought it was that way. Everyone was like, oh, you're so talented. And it actually got really hard. Probably the second year that I was sponsored by the North Face. Cause I got sponsored after my first season of running because I was just doing so well. And, my second season went well, but then I started putting pressure on myself, and I started being like, okay, well then if you're a new person and you're, winning things maybe at a national level, if you like bump it up to an international level, it's actually quite normal if you're not going to win things anymore, but then you have pressures of sponsors and
you're kind of used to winning straight from the get-go. So yeah.
And then you can, trail running, like you can actually pick certain races. Like there are certain races where there's not a crazy amount of density, and there are races where they're super competitive and you can travel there. But some athletes, if they're afraid of not winning, they won't travel to these races. And so I tried to avoid that because I didn't want to be burned out. I wanted to do running because it just made me so happy. And I got to explore and I got to try my best at these certain races. So it was actually, ironically, the accident that I had in 2017 kind of came at an opportune time, because I could feel that running was becoming this task and this job. Like I was putting pressure on myself just to perform, but for whom, it was becoming something that's I would go to these races well, should I go to this race because I want to, or should I go to it because my sponsor wants me to go? Or, I'd worry okay, if I don't perform here, it's something that, obviously athletes have, it's an issue if that's how you're getting paid, or how, you can travel to these different parts of the world. There is that pressure. But when I fell off that cliff and then I, had to
you're just ruining it for everyone. I was going to lead in with a really suspenseful story. Now you've told the ending. No, keep going.
We can do this again.
Keep going with what you were going to say.
When I had this, I was able to basically just kind of have my running on reset and really evaluate the reasons why I run.
Well, let's go there then. Before we go any deeper into kind of what that meant for you, what that led. So, in 2017, you were ranked first in a prestigious Sky Running World Series. Before we go any further, what is Sky Running for someone who doesn't know?
That is, yes. So, and I happened into this, it was because of my nickname. People are like, oh, Hillary, you love the uphill. You need to do the steepest races that there are. So I did this stuff called Sky Running, which is technically it's from the sea to the sky. It started in Europe. So it's basically just the most direct way to get from the bottom of the trail to the top of the trail. So is it
fell running?
Exactly. It's fell running, except maybe more established trails, but fell running is pretty much no trails at all and bogs and things. Some of the sky runs do include that for sure. You have some scrambling. It's just basically overall, it's a lot of elevation gain in a race. So a typical race profile, and I did the ultra version. So that's anything over a marathon, typically a 50K up to 100 kilometers. But yeah, so a 50-kilometer race, which is about 31 miles, would have around 11,000 feet of gain. So pretty steep. Wow, yeah. And yeah, you have to you scramble, which is you use your hands in some way. So yeah, it's pretty fun. And some of the you have ropes that'll help, and people, literally it's not uncommon for there to be people on the course, with a fixed rope to make sure that people are safe going through a certain ridge line area. And so I was competing in that. That's basically how I found my success in the US. And then I kind of jumped on the world circuit the next year in 2015. And I was basically just, traveling, picking my races based on, where the coolest courses seem to be. And they have these races all over the world, and a lot of them in Spain and Italy and France, some in the United States as well. And And so I was kind of just like picking my race season. Races would start in May and you can go until September or October. So to compete in a series, it's pretty intense because you're usually racing once every month. And it's a big commitment with travel as well. So that's what I was competing in, kind of in the start of my trail running career, up until 2017, when I was, it was kind of cool because my first year I was ranked like 5th in the world. And then, I was like climbing the ranks. I was at 3rd and then, and 2nd. And then finally I was like winning the series, which was like one of my big goals. Like I had won a sky running race and, a few that season and placed really well. And, I was like, I was feeling it. I was like at the top of my game.
So you were at the top of your game, but you did say starting to feel some pressure, starting to feel maybe a little bit of that sensation that many runners get, both at the top and across the board, of losing some of the joy because of a fear of not being as good or not being what people expect you to be. But something very humbling happened. So tell us what happened.
Yeah. And exactly. It's like, and no one wants to be in that place of like, have this thing that you love so much and that's a part of your life, start to kind of take a turn for the worse. Like whether it's like, you have this relationship where you almost don't like it anymore, or your self-identity starts to get kind of wrapped up in this one thing or achieving or, winning a race. But yeah, in 2017, I traveled to Tromsø, Norway. It's way far up north in the Arctic Circle. And I picked that race because it's put on by Kilian Jornet and Emily Forsberg. They're two notoriously amazing athletes. Like Kilian's like, the best mountain alpinist runner in the world, mountain runner. And, his girlfriend, his partner, she's one of the best female runners, also trail runners. And, they put on this race and I was super excited to be there. And, basically it's advertised as a very technical race, but this terrain, like you run on this Humperrocken Ridge is what it's called. It's this gnarly mountain, but, that's the type of terrain that I'm used to training on, that I've been used to running on. So you use it's super steep. It was basically a 35-mile race, with about 15,000 feet of gain. Oh. So really steep because you're basically at these fjords. So you just start to see and you just go straight up and then cross the mountain, straight down, up again. And I was about halfway through the race on this ridge. And I remember just feeling amazing. I still remember the feeling of seeing my friends and some photographers out there. It's some runners I knew who I was running with. I think I'd moved into 3rd place at that point. I was doing pretty well and gaining on the women ahead of me. And then 1 minute I was running and the next minute, literally the horizon was upside down. It was not where it was supposed to be. And the world just slowed down and it was I still remember it vividly. I mean, and sometimes I'll still get that, a falling dream.
Do you does it make you kind of get short of breath or or do you, yeah. So still.
And it still happens. It still happens sometimes when when I'm out hiking or I'm on a run and I look that still happens. Literally sometimes I'll look over an edge and I'm I wonder if I've fallen that far before. Okay, this makes me really uncomfortable. It sometimes takes my breath away, but my hands start to sweat. But so I remember falling and the world just slowed down. I just remember I do remember my own voice was I was floating above my head, watching myself fall, but I was telling myself okay, this is it. This is your demise. You're going to die. You need to do something to it was very matter of fact. It was just I was telling myself look, Hill, this is happening. Do A, B, and C. Let's try to get through this. I told myself to relax, stay calm. But then every time I remember hitting the ground several times, but then I would try to grab for something, but then I kept on falling. And that repeated itself several times. And then at some point I passed out, and then the next thing I know, I'm on the side of the like on a mountain.
So
and
you did remember, you remember waking up there?
I do. So what I remember waking up is I remember, obviously the pain. Cause at that point, like when I was falling, it didn't hurt. It just is like, it feels like someone's like kicking you in the chest, like with pressure, like just the wind constantly getting knocked out of you. But then it wasn't until I woke up that like, I think the pain woke me up. And then there was this guy's face like really close to mine. And then it was just kind of a blur. But that guy, I had recognized him because I had like literally just passed him as we came up onto that Humperockin Ridge. And at this point, like then different people that I had recognized, like various photographers from the race. I remember Killian's face.
How did Killian get there so fast?
Yeah, so I think you're supposed to run with a phone just in case, like it was like the emergency number. And I was on the ridge, so there's no trees or anything, so you can see for miles. And thankfully, this day was clear because typically in Norway it's pretty foggy. And the previous year was like literally you could see maybe 15 feet ahead of you, so it was really lucky. So basically some photographers on the ridge they saw me fall. And so they had called it in.
Okay.
And I'm not sure as much time had passed. I think it was maybe 2.5 or 3 hours from the time that Manu, this man had come down to get me to the time that I was in the hospital. And in that time, they have a rescue team on call, which is good in those races. Like it's lucky that it happened during a race. And then they're able to kind of get the doctor to me and hoist me into a helicopter. But I mean, that wasn't straightforward because, I'm obviously, I don't remember this part. I do remember like a doctor coming and like basically faces, but it was like everything was just pulsing at that moment just because I was in so much pain. But after, people would tell me it's like, the helicopter, like they couldn't land. They had to hover on this ridge and they were like, with the chopper blades, they were shooting, like debris down. Like, so people were trying to cover me so that I wasn't getting more rocks on me. And then the doctor had to scramble down to me. And I mean, that's 150 feet and it's off of a sheer cliff. So, I mean, it takes a while to like safely maneuver your way down. With again, not putting down any rocks to the people that are there below. So, I mean, it was a really dire situation. I'm really fortunate that the helicopter was there because if not, the people would have had to like carry me off the mountain, but like on their backs, or maybe not even have been able to find me. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so I got airlifted to the nearest hospital in Tromsø, which, as the crow flies, it wasn't that far. And from there, I was. They had to do all the x-rays and see what my injuries were and kind of see if I had a concussion, if my skull was fractured or, internal bleeding and all of that stuff. And I remember being in the helicopter and like this whole time when the rescue operation is happening and they're hoisting me up into the cot and like, trying to move me and my back is broken. Like I knew that had happened because like it would just hurt so bad. They had to lift me up and then they had to put me in this cot and then swing me out and then like lift me up into the helicopter. And that felt like I was falling all over again. Yeah. And I remember when I went to, when I was inside the helicopter and I was like face to face with this doctor, that was the first time that I like asked him, I was like, am I going to be okay? Because the whole time going through my head was like, you're dying. Like, this is it. Like I was telling myself to breathe because like, I didn't want to forget to breathe. And yeah, it was just so scary. Yeah. And I had never seen that look on people's faces before, that look of just absolute terror because like they were thinking what I was thinking, that, I wasn't going to survive this whole thing. Yeah.
I mean, it gives me chills, brings tears to my eyes, even just hearing you say it. And I can only imagine for those people. And, we hear so often in those moments, you have to kind of stay calm for that person. But like you said, in your eyes, there's certain parts of our body language that we just can't you can't hide it. I mean, unless you are particularly skillful at deceit or something, I think for the most part, it's impossible to hide. And that does make it more scary for you, you know, seeing that fear in their face and, you know, ending up with, 2 broken arms, 2 broken vertebrae, 2 broken ribs, popped ligament, several severe lacerations and a sprained left ankle. Not exactly your body feeling its best right there. But what do you remember about those first few days? You know, the thought of this is me dying must have kind of slowly eased away. And what did go through your mind when you kind of started to come out of that?
Yeah. And I mean, it was really lonely, honestly, because I was basically, this was one of the last races of my season. And so I was away from home for, 3 months. Mm-hmm. And I knew that my mom and my dad were watching from afar, like online. And my cell phone was with me, but it broke obviously during the fall. So I had no way of getting in contact with anyone. I was in this hospital. I mean, thankfully they spoke English, but I mean, I was just completely devastated because I don't even think the race was on Saturday. And I don't even think I came to terms that like people were coming to visit me in the hospital and they're talking about some accident. And I was just like, what accident? Like what happened? And it wasn't until like Monday probably or Tuesday when I actually saw my mom when she came to Norway that I realized that it was me that had fallen off the cliff. Because
so at that point you had kind of essentially forgotten the few days before, or?
No, I don't know if it was amnesia from like hitting my head, but like, or also just like the insane amount of painkillers I was on, or just like, your body like does this weird thing of like, like in extreme bouts of pain, like it kind of shuts it out. Right. But it was the weird thing is that like, even though I was thinking about this accident, I was having that dream like every night of falling. Mm-hmm. But I think I was just like in some sort of state of denial. But then I think I realized just because of like, the third day that I wasn't able to even move out of my hospital bed that I was like, oh my gosh, like this is me. And, it was just this sinking feeling of like, so confusing because literally the last moment that I remember was like, I was running during this race. And then all that other stuff, like it seemed like a dream. It seemed like, did I just imagine this? Like, was that falling feeling really me? And then I started piecing it all together. And it like, then once my mom was there, it was kind of like, okay, wow, like this definitely happened. And I could like, I thought I was dreaming when I was like looking down at my body and seeing it all casted up and like with lacerations and stuff like that. And then realizing my limitations, like I said, I couldn't get up out of bed because I couldn't bear weight on my feet. And I couldn't, my hands were operated on, like my wrists. I had like an external fixation, which is like, like the wires coming out of one wrist because it was broken so badly. So I needed help with everything. Like I couldn't eat. I couldn't bathe. I couldn't walk. It was absolutely devastating. Like, and in that moment, that's like, that's an athlete's hell because mm-hmm. You feel, I was literally at the strongest point in my season, strongest point, like athletically. And then I could literally run miles through the mountains. And then I couldn't even, get up out of bed. And I was kind of, it was scary how quickly my will to like keep going and living each day was just deteriorating. Like I like didn't want to eat because like, I was just so sad and just in like so much pain. Like it was scary.
Yeah. Was any part of that like, see, obviously I have nothing to compare it to, but when I was, going through, of course I related to this childbirth, I remember
you have something to relate to.
I remember getting to one point because, I was adamant I wasn't going to have any medication. I remember getting to one point and during the pushing stage, sorry to anyone who that's going to make uncomfortable, but this is natural. And I remember saying to Steve, like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do it. And, and I'd always thought of myself as so tough, so gritty, like, but then there's something that just kind of, I don't know. I feel like when you're an athlete, you feel so invincible when you're in your thing. But then there's certain things like I remember even going to hot yoga classes and I would just be like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And it was, being hot in a hot room made me feel like that. But there's certain things that bring you out of that. You just feel like, you're like, oh, I was a fraud. I was never tough at all. It was just, was there any of that going on? Like, well, I thought I was strong and I'm not, and I'm weak. I can't handle this. Like, how did you handle it mentally?
I mean, that was one of the hardest parts. And like, I think you've actually described my mentality, like within the first, like you described my mentality, even the first like year of my recovery, like, and there's still mental aspects, like literally today, before we started talking, like I wrote down affirmations because like, there are still some times when, like I struggle with like, not feeling in my element or like not feeling good in like in my body a certain day or like my training or anything. But those early days, and it's even persisted throughout, I was so confused because I had defined myself on being a strong athlete, a strong woman. And like, it took me a really long time. I mean, to be comfortable, like I always had, like, I wasn't rail thin. Like I've always had like muscle, like in tennis, like you need that for tennis, and you need that for, certain sports. But one of my biggest, like, even when I got into running, I almost hated it because like there was people who were like, oh, like you run marathons, you run how long? You don't look like a runner. And I'm like, oh my God, I hated it. And like, sometimes it would like just make me cry, and it would make me just like hate myself. And I was like, okay, this needs to change, because I'm not gonna let someone else define like what makes me happy or what makes me feel strong in my own body. Like literally I would go for a run, feel so powerful and strong and beautiful. And then like this one person would come and say this, and then all of that was stripped away. I was like, you can't let this happen. So I basically turned it. I was like, yeah, I am a strong runner because I need these muscles to like take me up and down the mountain. So like, screw you, and like, screw your perception of what a runner is supposed to look like. Like, I am a runner, like I am a trail runner, and this is what strong looks like. Like, I turned it into this empowerment thing. But then during my injury, that was all backwards. Like, because I was so weak, I couldn't lift a toothbrush. Like I had to have a nurse, like, oh my God, my hair was braided. And literally after 3 days, I still hadn't been able to wash my hair, and like, it was caked with like blood, and they had to like shave parts of my head because it was so tangled. Like I couldn't even brush my hair. I couldn't do anything by myself. So that is the opposite of strong. And so I was completely, my life was turned upside down. I did not know who I was anymore because I had defined myself, like tried to put this like strong athlete mentality, strong, like physical, like screw you. This is what a runner, like, it doesn't matter what a runner looks like. Like I'm a runner and this is what I look like, and I'm performing well. So it doesn't matter what I look like look at my performances. And then to have that all switched on me because I was so like debilitated and weak, that was a really big turning point for me because I had to redefine what strength looked like and what strong meant. And I had to learn that it's really strong to be vulnerable and to really strong to like ask for help and to rely on other people and have people that you can confide in and say like, look, I'm really struggling right now. Like, this is really hard. Like, I need your help. And that takes strength. And before I didn't really know what that strength looked like. I thought, out of ignorance, like I thought strong was like, let me do it myself.
Yeah,
which
independent. I can,
Yeah. Which is, I mean, obviously that's a huge part of me. Like you can ask my mother and anyone who knows. I'm a very independent person, but now I've learned what the other, like it's almost like a coin, like the yin and the yang. It's like there's another aspect of strength, and it reinforces the independence. Like, and yeah, I had to come face to face with that every day, and it wouldn't go away because problems kept on coming up throughout my recovery. And I had to find a way to kind of keep going and keep confronting them. And and learn what strength looked like from from the ground up.
Were you thinking a lot of the time about that, about getting out to running? Like, well, if I can just get back to running, then I can prove that I'm strong.
Yeah. So at first I thought that. I was like, okay, well, I had broken both feet, like multiple bones in my feet. I was like, okay, those will heal. Like my arms will heal. I don't need my arms for running. Like, I mean, you do, but like, yeah. And actually in Norway, they had missed this major ligament fracture. So like, I kind of was like, okay, like how long will this take to recover? Like, I mean, I'd broken my back. Thankfully I didn't need surgery for that, but I knew like bones would heal. Right. But when I went back home to Colorado, I went to see some experts, some sports medicine doctors, and they diagnosed this Liz Franck injury in my foot, which is a major ligament that contributes to the integrity of your arch, which is like the spring of a running stride. So she looked at me and this doctor was like, look, maybe you'll jog again, but you are not going to be an elite athlete again. Like this is a foot changing injury. Like you need to like come to terms with this. And like, I was, all hope was just kind of like, oh my God. Like I just felt like I was like sucker punched and like, I just kind of like at that time, it's like, I felt like just numb and like, I didn't want to keep going. So at that point I had to take running off the table. Like, I think up until that point, I mean, this is maybe 2 weeks. Like I knew like it would suck and like I could heal, but it was already kind of like, okay, like if I could just get back to running, everything will be okay. Like I won't have to be this like weak person for this long. But once that happened and I was scheduled for surgery, it was 3 months of not being able to bear weight.
Can I just ask you, when she said that, looking back on that now, I'm sure initially after when you did start running again, you kind of almost like cursed her. Like, why would you say that? Like, you just destroyed my confidence and my hope for no reason. But now do you see it in any way as, I'm actually really glad she said that because it allowed me to kind of say, all right, I need to find something else about myself. Like, are you grateful she said that, or you still kind of have a bit of a like against her?
It's funny. I think when she first said it, I was like, don't you dare say that to me. Like, I'm going to punch you in the stomach with my, external fixation. It's going to hurt. But like, no, I'm actually, and I'm so grateful that she said it because I really appreciate people when they're blunt. Like I'm a very blunt person, like sometimes to a fault. It can get me in trouble sometimes being too honest, but I was so glad that she was so honest and frank with me, because what it did for me is it didn't eliminate hope. It didn't eliminate my motivation, but it brought me back down to reality. And I'm a scientist at heart. Like I deal best with numbers. And so it's like, I mean, but again, I'm an optimist. So it's like, if she says it's near impossible, she's not saying it's impossible. She's saying it's nearly impossible. So like that near impossible is like, okay, basically she's leaving the rest up to me. So I can decide what I want to do with it. But I was eternally grateful for her for saying that, because it brought me face to face with reality. Like there's no getting around it. Like this is probably going to be the hardest recovery of your life. And if you really want to get back to running, well, then you will find a way to do it, but it's not going to come easy. And like, there's these unavoidable things that you have to do, like I knew I couldn't bear weight for 3 months. And I knew like probably within 6 months to a year, I'd have to have a second surgery to remove like the screws. So like it was the screws that they had put in that they were going to put in my foot. But yeah, everyone asked me, they're like, oh, you must've been so mad. And like, why do doctors do that? Why do they tell you? And I'm just like, no, like I appreciated her honesty, because that was the best thing she could have done. And at that point, it's like to have that separation. I was already struggling before the accident of, do I even really like running? Like, do I like running at the elite level? Like, is this pressure too much for me? And then to basically eliminate that and be like, okay, Hillary, you are no longer like Hilly Goat, the elite runner. Like that part of you might be dead. So let's like figure out who you are and what makes you tick. And like, you're going to forget about that side of you for now. And that doesn't mean that I'm not going to work really hard, because of course I worked really hard during my recovery, but having that distinction and that separation, it allowed me to foster that belief in myself and like have it sit in on a shelf in a room. It's like a little seed that has been planted and you forget about. And then all of a sudden, you look at it 3 months later and you can see it's kind of starting to sprout and you're getting stronger. And then you're start to think okay, do I need to start watering this plant? What's happening? It was the coolest experience because then I was able to really evaluate the reasons why I wanted to run, why I wanted to start trying to run again, and why I loved running in the first place. And it had nothing to do with winning races, and it had nothing to do with being a sponsored runner, but it had everything to do with how I felt when I was out in nature, how I felt when I could, move my, look at a distant peak and be like, I wonder if I could get there. Or, look at a distant part, a map of the world and see these pictures and be like, wow, okay, that would kind of be cool if I could explore there on my own 2 feet. So I saw that, and I saw that as something worthy to work towards, regardless if I was running. I just wanted to be able to move on my own volition and for my own peace of mind and my own happiness. And I think that started from the very beginning of you might never be an elite runner again.
Did you have a lot of time? When you're sitting in hospital, you obviously have a lot of time where you're just, not able to move. So you can't, bring in a lot of distractions. But did you make a conscious effort to kind of, not pick up your phone all the time, not be watching TV, but to give yourself time to actually be with your thoughts, to actually kind of work on things? Or was that something that came later because at the beginning you just needed anything and everything that could distract you from kind of facing it, I guess?
Yeah. So honestly, at the very beginning, social media was something I kind of since I was in Norway when the accident happened, it was something I was able to kind of stay in contact with people and with friends, to let them know that I was okay. And I've always been a very private person. I think actually even from the beginning of having Hilly Goat as a persona versus me, it's kind of a way to separate the two things. And it's so easy to get distracted by that stuff and and look at other people, be like, oh my God, they're running. Why am I not running? So there was definitely some times where I had to take a step back and completely forget about it and delve into things that just, that didn't bring attention to the fact that I couldn't run or couldn't move. And at first it was actually really hard. I honestly, a lot of my friends, were my training partners. It's how you catch up. If you're busy working, I would call my friends and we go for a run and we catch up and it would just be so wonderful. And I couldn't do that anymore. I felt like I was being forgotten about, and I felt like I was being punished because I couldn't run with them anymore, and that they didn't like me anymore because I couldn't run with them. So I there was this pretty big hole in my life that I felt like I was just losing this whole part of me. But really that wasn't true. It's just I had to show up in a different way, right? So I had to take a break from social media from that standpoint. But then I made a pact with myself that, okay, I was going to be super honest with my recovery, because I feel like a lot of athletes shy away from that. Either they're scared that they don't want to admit that they're injured because of fear of losing a sponsorship, which is a real thing. I mean, it happens, or, admitting that they want to have kids one day, and then their sponsor's we heard this, let's take a look at your contract. It's just it's ridiculous things can happen. And so I understand why athletes do that. But I decided right then, because I had already decided that, well, I don't know if I'm going to be an elite runner again, so screw it. I'm just going to do me. And I wanted to be a voice for people who are struggling with injury and be honest. And I just wanted to be super honest with with myself, but anyone who was struggling with injuries themselves. Cause like whenever I was injured, I wish that I could like reach out and talk to someone like, okay, like I'm feeling like this, like, is this normal? Like, am I supposed to just like bide my time and hide in a corner until I'm healed and then be like, oh, I'm back. Here's my comeback like race. So I started being more vocal about like, okay, like today it sucks. Like,
and you did it in video form, which was even more like vulnerable, like you sitting there either in the hospital or in your house. Like it really like, you know, I don't know if you follow Brene Brown, and people are fed up with me bringing her up, but
I love her.
She's like the ultimate, what you did is like the ultimate vulnerability that she kind of talks about being, you know, so strong, so courageous, so empowering. So you absolutely did it. So,
well, thank you. I mean, she's like one of my role models. So like I'm reading a ton of Brene Brown when I was like, you know, like reading was something that I leaned into just because I love reading. And like, I wouldn't describe myself, like I would describe myself as honest. And so I just wanted to be honest. And if not for anyone else who was struggling with an injury, but for myself, because I couldn't, like, I knew how much I was struggling every day and I couldn't like put on a happy face. I literally couldn't. Like some days I would wake up and like, I just felt like crying. And, so I wanted to be honest about that. And like, in video form, like I would just kind of be like, yeah, like I'm really struggling today. And, you know, my dearest friends would, you know, contact me from around the world. Cause like, that's the cool part about traveling is you make friends everywhere, but they're not necessarily next to you when you need them. And then I would get an overwhelming amount of support from people that I didn't know saying that they were struggling with an injury too, like, or they had been through this injury and they got through it too. So words of encouragement from complete strangers. And it was just cathartic because like there was no threat that the North Face was going to take away my sponsorship because I was injured. Like I had already, like I was like already had kind of been at peace with that if my contract was ending that year. And like I literally didn't know if I was going to sign again. So I thought to myself, okay, like you owe it to yourself to be honest. It was such a cathartic experience just to get the words out there in the form of writing or anything. And I'm a big advocate for journaling because it's just like, you can just get everything out there. And if you're honest with yourself, it encourages people being honest with you. And I just created this like incredible community, both virtual and, you know, in the actual physical place I was, which is in Boulder, that helped me get through these dark days. And some of the like actual physical community I had was my coach, but also my PTs who literally I could show up to them and be like, there were days when I like showed up and I was honest to them about this. Like I had wished the accident would have killed me because I was feeling so overwhelmed with just my inability to do anything that I was able to do before. Like, I mean, the ultimate like vulnerability is like have your loved one or someone, even that you don't even know, but like bathe you and, you know, help you get dressed. And then you've already asked them to do this for you, but you're not done. You have to ask them to cook dinner for you. And sometimes like help feed you. Like it's just, it didn't end. And I just felt so vulnerable all of the time that that I just felt so far removed from the strong person that I once was. But I think in being extremely vulnerable and honest with all of the ups and downs of my recovery, that's what allowed me to realize again what that vulnerable strength is. And it's what helped me to keep going like every day throughout my recovery. And even though I like said I wouldn't wanted to give up, or I felt like I wanted to give up, I wouldn't let myself give up, which sometimes was frustrating because I was like, Hillary, oh my God, today is like really hard. Like, why can't you just like go home? And like, but I was, you know, like calling an Uber to go to the PT and like,
That's so good. And that you were able to do that. And for someone listening who feels like they have lost themselves, so many runners resonate, I'm sure, with what you're saying. And I will tell everyone, go back and listen to the episode with Cindy Kuzma and Carrie Jackson Cheadle, who also feature you in their book. last week, actually, that episode came out. So if you are struggling through an injury, that episode is fully focused on that. So be sure to go listen to that one. But what would be the biggest thing you learned, or the biggest thing you would say to someone who is in that spot right now?
Yeah. So I would say surround yourself with people that are able to hear like the negative thoughts, like, or your fears. Because for me, it was really important to be like, to say to someone like out loud, like, I'm afraid I'm never going to run again, or like, who am I going to be if I don't have this? And like, it helps like kind of put that out there, or just basically surround yourself with people you can be honest with. And I think the biggest thing that I learned is, no matter how dire a situation feels or looks from the outside, if you have this sense of belief in yourself, like just find that sense of belief. And if you don't have it, then fake it until you make it. Like literally, I had to write down every day, like, believe that your strongest athletic days are ahead of you. And that didn't have anything to do with competition or anything. Like, it just believing in yourself that you can do this, that maybe you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel right now, but that doesn't mean it's not there, because it is there. You just haven't, like, maybe you're just like stuck looking in one direction. But I literally, even though like, I remember writing down this affirmation, like, believe in yourself, believe that your best athletic days are ahead of you. I remember sometimes writing it and I'm just like, this is bullshit. Like, I don't know if I believe this, but like the more I wrote it, the more I said to myself, and the more I kind of like was like, all right, like, we're doing this today. The more I was able to buy into it, and it changed my life. And so it's like that belief, to me, I think that people are stronger than they give themselves credit for. Like, if you would have asked me 3 years ago that if I was going to, go through something like this, I'd be like, you're kidding me, right? Like, I can't do something like that. But if you give yourself permission to endure a little bit of something unpleasant, or to suffer a little bit, like, you will be surprised how strong a sense of survival and your ability to problem solve and get through tough times. And like, that's the coolest thing, is to discovering what you're made of, and discovering how strong that you are. And it helps you in so many other aspects of your life. So, I mean, I know that was probably a lot of things, but
no, that's really good. Really, really helpful. And, you gave a practical thing there, as well as just kind of a state of mind. And I've mentioned this before, but just as I know there are many, many new people listening here, I have mentioned before that if you are struggling with the kind of journaling aspect of writing, like, I believe this, or I am strong, or whatever, start writing to yourself first. Like, when I would do this when I was injured, I would say like, okay, Tina, today sucks. This is really hard, but you've been through blah, 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 or you've already overcome blah, blah, blah. And start by talking to yourself as if you are, a friend or a sister or something. And then as you kind of, start to be like, yeah, I am. Yeah, I can. Then transition over. And it's really powerful when it does it. And you transition over, even during this one page or whatever it may be. And I would find by the end, I was like, I am strong and I am going to do this. And this is what I'm going to accomplish, or this is what I'm going to get through, and I'm going to make it to this. And you switch, and you kind of get that. It almost reminds me of like a football coach, like yelling at his team. And by the end, the team's like, yeah, so if you have to start doing it by talking to yourself first, because it feels like too, like fake or whatever, then start doing it that way, and then transition over once you've kind of, given yourself a little bit of a pep talk. So just wanted to add that in there.
I love it. Because it's like, you're your own like best cheerleader.
Exactly. I still have those journals, like all of them. And it's quite funny reading them, because I mean, for me, looking back now, it was like when I was in college, and it was like, I am going to make it to the national championships. And it was things that just, now I'm just like, why was I so concerned about like one national championship? Like, it was like life or death to me at the time. But, just perspective really, I guess. But okay. So, as people can kind of guess, you did manage to get back out there. You did manage to get to, running. And how did you, as you were coming back into running and starting to run again, how did you not kind of fall into that trap that so many people with injuries or even accidents have had, where it's like, I've got to get back to where I was. I've got to prove to myself that I'm just as strong as I was before, especially if you'd been writing it in journals. And you said you didn't have that kind of pressure to be at the elite level, but at a certain point, that seed, as you mentioned, must have gone to a point of like, well, should I? Can I? And then how did you not let it get spiral out of control to where you all you wanted to do is get back? Like we heard Amelia Boone talk about this multiple times. Like, how do you not focus on getting back?
Yeah. And so, to quote an LL Cool J song,
Nice.
Don't call it a comeback.
That's true.
Like literally, I would say this to myself. And to other people, I was like, no, do not call this a comeback. Because like, first of all, when I would say that, because in my mind, I was putting that pressure on myself. I was like, well, can you? Like, maybe I didn't have external pressure from like the North Face or something, but I had internal pressure like on myself. Like, you constantly think of like, oh, okay, well, like, I wasn't running that loop as fast as I did like this time last year. Like, what's going on? Like, there's always that, like, there's always those thoughts. And I was really like, I was getting competitive with myself and like wondering, I was like, okay, like I want to get back here, but like, Hillary, don't think about that. Like, you can't, like, you're not ready yet. And I would get mad at other people or annoyed because I'm like, no, do not call it a comeback, because coming back means I'm coming back to the same place I started. But I felt like a completely different person. And so that's how I separated it, is that it didn't matter if I ran the same split as I did last year. It's like, I had this like analogy in my head, like if you're running a mountain race, and sure, like it's great if it's like perfect trails, bluebird sky, like, but like, what if it rains and then there's a ton of mud on the trail? Like, you're going to go slower. Like everyone is. Like, it's like that. It's like, you can't compare it. And I felt like I was just this completely different person. So it wasn't a comeback, because I wasn't the same Hillary. I wasn't the same person. I was this totally new person who had like a bunch of new knowledge. I'd learned a bunch of different things. I had this new love for running, and running didn't feel the same way as it did before. I mean, physically, but also emotionally. And so I actually was really hesitant about doing my first race. My coach basically had to like surprise, throw me into these like, surprise, I got you into this race. Like, here you go. I'm like, wait, what? Because I was scared, because I didn't, like, I was actually almost hiding. Like I wanted running to be myself and be with myself, and like, and I didn't want to show it to the world. And in fact, like my coach was running with me and doing, like, we were doing these climbs, and like, he was recording it on Strava and I wasn't recording it. And then he's all just like showing me, he's like, Hillary, like, you're doing well. Like your times are comparable, like not as a way of like edging on my competitiveness, but like being like you're a strong athlete. Like you're doing well. Like you should try and not be afraid. And so when I finally jumped in that race, I think I was like crying on the start line and shaking, because I was in a sky race. It was a Broken Arrow sky race. I had done the vertical kilometer.
What was the reason for the crying?
Yeah. So I was just like, I was so scared that like, it was a sky race, that like, what would happen again? Or B, like if I would be disappointed in myself if I wasn't elite again. And I think, like I said to myself, like, I sound like a crazy person, but like, I was just like, I think I wrote in my journal something like this too, but I said it at the beginning of the start line. I was like, this is what courage looks like.
Yes.
You are scared and like, you're afraid. And I'm like, tears are in my eyes. I'm like, you're scared, you're afraid, but this is what courage looks like. Like the gun goes off in a minute. Like you're going to do this. Like you are going to do this. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, doesn't matter that this is a race, that everyone's around you. Like screw it. It doesn't matter. Like you are racing yourself for yourself. Like, let's go. Like, let's celebrate that you can run again, like, and it was that moment that I was like, like there's someone else talking to me. I was like, okay. And like, then the gun goes off and I'm just like, then kind of the nerves float away and I'm like, then my body knew what to do. And that was like the magical experience, is like like, yeah, like this is what courage looks like. Like you're scared, you confront fear and you're like, okay, hello fear. Like you're really scary. And like, I see you, but I'm going to keep running and I'm going to keep going. And, that was the most liberating feeling ever, because then at that point, it didn't matter. I finished like sixth, in this like 52-kilometer race. Like it was decent, but like, I didn't care. I could have finished like last or first and like set a course record. Like I was just so happy to be out there. And then after that, I had planned to go to one of my favorite places in the world, Cortina d'Ampezzo. It's in Italy. It's in the Dolomites. It was a title race for the North Face. And I had already planned on going there before I had gotten injured. And so I was doing a speaker series for the North Face there. And I decided to hop in the 50K, and I ended up winning that race. And did I set a course record? No, I nearly set, I was like 2 minutes off of the course record time that I had done, like, before the injury, like when I was at my prime. And I was just like, that's when I realized like, it's the magic that can happen when you like look fear straight in the face. And like, I wasn't running for anyone else but myself. Like, and in that race, like I started at the back because I was just like, yeah, this is just going to be a fun run in the Dolomites. Like, let's go. Like, I get to just like, eat little apple tarts and like, like say ciao to like the people. And yeah. And then it just like turned into this magical feeling. And then from there, it's just,
So did you kick over like at some point in that race into competitive mode, or was it just kind of celebrating the whole time?
It was kind of this weird, like celebrating the whole time. I think like I can get weirdly competitive, like later in a race, but it was mainly for myself. Like I had no idea where I was. Like I knew I was passing people, but there was like several races going on at the same point. So I was just kind of running. And I mean, I knew I was like moving well, but like people would say something to me in like Italian. They're like, "Prima donna." I was like, yeah, you're confused. Like, bye. I'm going to keep. But yeah. And then from there, it was just kind of like, I don't know, just like, I didn't realize I had won the race until I was like running down the streets of Cortina. And then there was like the bike, in the front of me, like bringing me into the city.
Do you find that you are able to run courses the same way now with like, do you act extra cautious with, rocks that maybe look a bit unsteady, or do you take the risks you did before, or has that part of you kind of changed for good?
Yeah. So, and the crazy part is I don't think I wasn't a super big risk taker before. So that's also like something I really had to come to terms with. It like is, why did this happen to me? And, like I felt like I was a safe runner. Like I practiced on this terrain. Like, why does it happen? But I mean, you heard about people in avalanches and like, like they, like they're super experienced and sometimes they're the ones that get killed in these mountain accidents. But, and also in returning to runner, I spoke with a counselor because I needed to ask these questions and like to redefine who I was and separate myself from me as an athlete and the reasons why me as a person and the reasons why I try so hard and why I work so hard at something I love, and focusing more on those aspects. And then like, running is just a side effect of that. But absolutely. Like I still, to this day, like I still, am hesitant on ridge lines or certain routes, or, I won't on a certain day if I'm not feeling it. Like this is something that I've always had, like an intuition. But on other days, sometimes when you're with people, you're like, it doesn't feel right, but okay, like they want to go, I'll just go. But now, anytime something doesn't feel right, that to me is information. I'm just like, you know what? That route and that mountain is going to be there tomorrow. I'm going to do something else that feels better to me.
Well, intuition is there for a reason, and you've learned to ultimately trust your body, which
yeah. And, I mean, even since falling off the cliff, like last year, like over a year and a half later, I broke my ankle. Like this was a separate injury. Like I literally slipped on the ice 3 blocks from my house, finishing a run on the road. And I broke my ankle. Like I'd already run on the trails that day and I broke it. And I was like, I had to go through the whole recovery again and like not, and, be not weight bearing. I had surgery and I had to go through this whole thing again. And I was like even doubting if I could do that. So after all those injuries, like definitely, like sometimes I find myself being a little bit scared. But like when I find those things, I try to like take a deep breath and like, if it's really scary, like if it's in a dangerous situation, like on a ridgeline or a mountain, I'm like, okay, like you're allowed to be scared. Like this is completely okay. Like fear is a very normal human emotion. Like, okay, then maybe you're just not comfortable doing these things anymore. And that's okay. But other times it can arise from, being frustrated to fight and feeling, my foot or like the injuries that day. And then, I can problem solve in a different way. But having more compassion for the trauma that I've been through and being more patient with myself, because like recovering from that stuff physically takes time, but also mentally. Mm-hmm. And I think it's okay if I want to run, like, not scramble on a ridgeline. Like, I think fine.
I would say that's probably okay. Yeah. All right. So just to wrap up here, what's your relationship to running now? Like, how do you stop yourself from kind of getting back now that you are having success, you are kind of somewhat back to normal, even though still having some issues from time to time? How do you keep that relationship to running, kind of that healthy perspective you've learned from your accident?
Yeah. So, for me, it's all about like challenging myself and wanting to make myself the best version of myself that I can be. Mm-hmm. And, that involves traveling and doing courses that like sound interesting to me. But the coolest thing is that even last year with breaking my ankle and, 2 years ago, nearly dying and not, knowing if I'd be able to run again, I did the longest race I've ever done. And it was a 145-kilometer race through the Alps. And I placed second, and I was like, 10 minutes back from this person, which in a race that takes 22 hours, like it's pretty insane. But like but again, it's just like that. It's like doing races that excite me. And so that I want to get up every morning and work my way towards this goal. And then also throughout all of these things, like taking time away from like really evaluating why I want to run and why I want to do these things. If it doesn't excite me, then I don't want to do it. And then taking breaks. Like I discovered riding my gravel bike and, the joy of like reading and doing nothing, or just like traveling and combining that with my running and have it not be so one-sided, because I'm not one dimensional. I'm a fully, like, I've got so many interests and so many things that don't involve running, and making time for all of those, because it makes me a better person in the end. Yeah.
Well, that's a healthy way to look at it. And so good that you've been able to see, there is more to you than running. And it's interesting, even though you hadn't been in the sport that long, that, running got you in that way and so quickly managed to define you by that. And you did, final question here, you did say in a video that you were afraid you were going to be defined by what happened. Would you say that now you are?
So, no, I think it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like maybe people they recognize me, or they know like what has happened. But I don't think so. I think I'm actually defined by my honesty and my like showing up every day. And I think more of what I'm defined by, at least what I hope, is my resilience and like able to problem solve and look a problem straight in the face and say, okay, well, like I'm going to decide if I'm going to do this. And I hope that I can encourage other people to do the same in their lives, instead of just being like, okay, well, she's the woman who like fell off a cliff and like, had that one comeback race. But no, it's like, I'm the person that's defined by, wow, like she just does not give up, and like, she'll like keep problem solving. Like that's who I am. Mm-hmm. Not someone who, nearly died in some sky race.
I would say to you defined yourself perfectly by what you told yourself at that race when you said you saw fear, which is, this is what courage looks like. That is kind of what comes to mind with this whole interview, with everything that you've said. So I really want to thank you for being vulnerable, for sharing your story, for letting us into your mind. And saying things that so many people would have been thinking. But as you said, many elites and professional athletes struggle to open up in the way that you have. And I really think that's why people, love you so much, and why you're so, you have been able to do what you have because of that big heart of yours, and because of that vulnerability. So well done to you for just showing us, what strong looks like, what courage looks like, and for all that you've done, and for being a bright light in this world. So thank you so much, Hillary.
Oh, thank you. It's going to tears in my eyes now. Thank you so much for the conversation. It's been wonderful.
My friends, if you have a minute and you could leave a review on your favorite podcast player, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Spotify, or whatever else podcast player you use to listen to this podcast, or if you would subscribe to this podcast, you will help me get out in front of new runners to make our tribe even bigger and even better. It might not seem like you as one person can make a difference, but really it helps a lot. And it shows me you appreciate the hard work I put in for those. Thank you so much. That is quite the story, right, my friends? I mean, talk about a near-death experience, talk about kind of coming back from something, or they shouldn't say coming back from something which really could have just sent your life in a completely different direction. But I loved her attitude, and I love that she was able to kind of share those weakest moments. And if you do see those videos of her that she released or that she put out as it was kind of happening, you really see that emotion, and it's hard not to cry yourself watching those videos, because you really appreciate how vulnerable she's being and how honest she is being with that. So I really encourage you to go follow Hillary if you do not already. And she's just a wonderful person, as you heard there. So I'm really glad that we had the time to get to know her. And I want to thank her for giving us her time while she was traveling to talk to us on that day. So you can find links to everything that was mentioned in the show today at tinamuir.com/episode 171. Now, next week, we are going to be having Lisa Howard on the show, who is in the trail running and ultra world. She's definitely one of the favorite people out there. I see people talking about how much they love her all the time. Really very well-loved woman. She is 40. I think we figured out in the episode she's 48 years old. She couldn't exactly remember for sure. 48 years old, has accomplished a lot of things. She was recently going for an Olympic trials qualifier in the marathon, and she's won all kinds of races like Leadville and Javelina 100, even though she only started ultra running really at 35 and kind of just discovered she was good at it, and she still works full time. She has 2 kids. It's just, if you are someone who's very busy and doesn't have much time for yourself, I think you are going to appreciate that. Even if you don't have kids, I think a lot of it we talked about is kind of handling expectations, handling kind of a less than ideal situation, especially in this social media world where it feels like everyone's life is perfect. So be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, or tune in to Lisa's episode next week. Until then, my friends, have a great week.
Thanks for listening to the Running for Real podcast. Be sure to check out tinamuir.com for show notes and even more helpful running information.